GamingBolt presents top 25 games with mind-blowing boss fights. Bosses are often the highlight of any game, but these 25 titles offer up the biggest, most thought-provoking baddies that have ever closed out a level. Here are the 25 most mind-blowing boss fights. Please note that this list may have spoilers. Devil May Cry 4. Dante is used to taking on demons twice, sometimes 3 times his size, but Devil May Cry 4 took things to another level. The white-haired swordman flips across the screen, dodging fiery attacks from Burial, devastating blows from the Savior, and avoiding the pointed fangs of Echidna the She-Viper. Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 introduced a new kind of zombie. A strange plague had swept through the small European town, grotesquely transforming the inhabitants. While most of the enemies you gun down just have insects burst out of their necks, the bosses are a different kind of ugly. New limbs sprout from old ones, grotesque creatures stomp across the screen, and hidden creatures spring out of the shadows. Kingdom Hearts 2. The heartless take on some truly massive forms in Kingdom Hearts 2. Sora and the company run into some really well-designed heartless on their epic journey. Each one retains the shadowy design that epitomizes the enemy, while giving them unique visual flares to signify their strength and make them even more memorable as you take them down. And that isn't even counting all the fantastic Disney villains that pad out the lineup of bosses. Borderlands 2. One reason Borderlands 2 remains fun for so many hours is the thousands of guns to collect. The other is using those same guns on the bullet sponges that are bosses. Not only do you need to dodge area of effect attacks and take out hordes of fodder enemies, but also you need to empty seemingly dozens of clips into these sturdy foes. Undertale. Undertale's combat system is brilliant. If you choose to attack, the sequence plays out like some strange shoot-'em-up, but if you choose to act, you can converse with your opponent, opening up more options and potentially even befriending them. These mechanics are turned up to 11 for boss fights. Talking to the biggest of baddies yields some great dialogue, and the combat sequences are inventive and unpredictable, with some even changing the game's mechanics entirely. Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Castlevania Lords of Shadow sticks to the tropes of the franchise while imbuing it with new action and mechanics. The boss fights range from classics like vampires and other Lords of the Night to gigantic stone golems that wander aimlessly on a frozen lake. Every boss, no matter how small, is filled with spectacle and brilliant visuals, not to mention difficult to take down. Lords of Shadows reinvents Castlevania in the best way possible. Darksiders 2. It turns out that the land of the dead isn't a very cheery place. Even though Death is a member of the terrifyingly powerful Horsemen, some of the enemies that await him prove that its scythe isn't all-powerful. The Guardian stands out though. This colossal golem stomps through an empty field as Death rides around its rocky legs, slowly chipping away at its ancient body. Final Fantasy X. The highlight of every Final Fantasy game is its slew of bosses, but Final Fantasy X presents some of the biggest and strangest creatures that a spiky-haired protagonist has ever swung an oversized sword at. Some enemies like Seymour just can't stay away, coming back in a number of different forms, each more powerful than the last. Ninja Gaiden series. Ninja Gaiden is a series known for its difficulty. Even your typical fodder enemies are more than capable of tearing your heart out through your back. This difficulty makes every boss fight an event. The difficulty ramps up, forcing you to stay on your toes, learning patterns, narrowly dodging attacks, and slowly carving down their multi-layered health bars. ONIMUSHA series. Stepping into the sandals of a skilled samurai is exhilarating in ONIMUSHA. But the highlight is sinking your sword into the skeletal hides and weathered armor of the demons that serve as the game's bosses. Every boss feels consequential, ensuring that you know that they are much different from the enemies you spend the rest of your time hacking apart. Dragon's Dogma. Many of the enemies of Dragon's Dogma are big enough to climb on, so just use your imagination and think of how big its bosses must be. These titans of fantasy flood into arenas, tearing down columns, swinging clubs, and spewing flames, not necessarily in that order. Lost Planet 2. Want to take on massive insects with giant glowing weak spots? Then Lost Planet 2 is your answer. These titanic insects rise out of the sand and snow, towering above the player. The fearsome Red-Eye slithers up to the player's strain, firing flaming projectiles out of the sand and crumbling any weapon you turn its way. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. The Metal Gear series is famous for its titular robots and incoherent plots. The bosses of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance are equal parts robotic and bizarre. You'll start the game running up the limbs of the hulking Metal Gear Ray, cutting apart its arms and slowly wearing it down. Then there are enemies like Baldy Wolf, a mechanical wolf with a chainsaw on its tail, which it whips through the air, trying to tear Raiden in two. Shadows of the Damned. Suda51's Shadows of the Damned is equal parts brooding and moody, raunchy and funny, but its bosses carry none of the game's humor. These grotesque denizens of hell all have a strange sheen to them that can only be the blood of their numerous enemies. But their clever designs aren't all that's great. Defeating them takes patience, dexterity, and some really big guns. Okami. Your abilities in Okami are gained through brush skills, which give you more powers to harness with your magical paintbrush. Each new boss fight takes advantage of this mechanic. Like every Zelda boss has a weakness to a new weapon, Okami's enemies have weaknesses to new brush skills, and their beautiful watercolor designs make them pop off the screen as you try and wash them away. Batman Arkham City. Arkham City does boss fights right. Each one is extremely different, ensuring that these special encounters always stand out. But the brightest and coldest star is Mr. Freeze. Every time you land an attack, he implements measures to ensure that you cannot attack him the same way again, keeping you on your toes for the entire frigid fight. ASURA'S Wrath. The entirety of ASURA'S Wrath is essentially rocketing through the stars to punch bosses bigger than planets with 6 muscular arms. And this never gets old. Each new deity offers up a new challenge to face in visuals to gawk at. Many of the battles are played out through QTEs, putting more focus on the visuals that soar across the screen. Monster Hunter Ultimate. Boss is a loose term in Monster Hunter Ultimate. Every new enemy is tougher than the last, with no health bar to indicate damage and patterns that take careful observation to learn. Every new monster takes dedication and skill to conquer. Things get even more hectic when you bring in some friends to try and coordinate to bring down these thundering beasts. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The bosses of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time aren't the biggest on the list, but they are some of the best designed. Each new dungeon keeper requires a new weapon to be defeated, and can only be defeated through the clever use of these weapons. Each boss is a puzzle in itself, adding to the sense of accomplishment when you figure out its tells and plunge the Master Sword into it. Bayonetta 1 and 2. Where to begin with the Bayonetta series? The angles of Paradiso are anything but heavenly. Their bloated forms fill the screen, unleashing beams of energy and actively trying to obliterate the Umbra Witch. Each new foe is bigger than the last, with the last boss of the first game being the size of a planet. Things never get less crazy than that. Shadow of the Colossus. For a game that is all about seeking out and defeating massive bosses, it should come as no surprise that Shadow of the Colossus makes this list. Every new Colossus has a design that tells its own story, communicating the kind of creature it is. And then you scale its rocky hide and plunge your sword into it. The mere variety of bosses makes this game well worth a look. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Each Metal Gear Solid game has a unique cast of bizarre bosses, but Snake Eater has some of the most memorable. The end nestles between the blades of grass, dying with each second he hunts you down. Volgin, on the other hand, is full of bravado, electricity coursing through his massive fists as he lays into you, giving no quarter. And while the Shagohod isn't necessarily a Metal Gear, the nuclear tank still packs a punch. Bloodborne. Bloodborne continues the trend established by the Souls series of having massive bosses that serve as difficulty spikes in an already difficult game. But what separates these Lovecraftian horrors from other bosses are their designs. Each one personifies a new type of horror, sticking in the player's mind as they continue to work through the game. Souls series, Dark Souls and Demon Souls. The bosses in the Souls games are just unfair sometimes. They double up on you, change form in the middle of battle, and unleash massive attacks that are almost impossible to dodge. Every time the words flash on the screen that you've beaten a boss, a wave of satisfaction floods over you, until you run into the next boss. God of War 3. In this game, Kratos really gets down to brass tacks and kills most of the remaining enemies, and dismantling the Greek pantheon is a bloodbath of epic proportions. Poseidon encases himself in the ocean and rains down hurricanes. Kronos tries to crush you under his monstrous thumb, and Zeus launches a cavalcade of thunderbolts in Kratos' direction, tearing apart Mount Olympus in the process. Every fight raises the bar, proving why this game is known for its bosses.
Like this video? Why not give us a like and subscribe? We try and upload amazing videos almost every single day. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you on the next one.